See, the first thing you do is you start with a food court. Now, if you're dyslexic, you can look at this a little differently. You see, for two open eyes, diplomacy, see, or DC, diplomacy court, of universal revival training. You see? Now, you wonder, I gave this thing I talk about a preaching, and man, you say, some of these churches need a little help, I went to some churches and I asked the preacher, I says, hey man, they get to heaven? He goes, man, I don't know. When we get there, I'll ask, I don't know. I says, well, it look like the preacher need a little help. And I go, man, this guy, man, he's going to come here and take over the churches. He says, no, man, that's not what we're for. He says, okay. So I says, oh man, I said, how much time did you take to prepare a meal? He said, man, how much time did you take to prepare your educational plans? And some of those teachers, they look at a little workbook and they go, hey, I got a workbook, I got a little book, it's going to do everything for me. They didn't know I was in a GATE program, like a charter academy thing up there in Atlanta with the Center of Disease Control. He says, man, that's SkyTech. I said, okay. So they made a little building for it, And all the other kids, they just gave them some worksheets and some books, said, here, do your work. Well, the teachers didn't like me too much because they gave me a bunch of worksheets and some books and said, here, do your work. And it took the rest of the class like a couple of days to a week to do the work. I was done in like 20 minutes. You wonder why Donald Trump was sitting in that church in Las Vegas? He's like, while you guys were gambling, with education and stuff, these educational lotteries and stuff. He goes, man, we had that Ace, that Ace kid you didn't know about. And he says, so he sat in the church and he's got this $20 bill in his hand. And he's got this 20. He goes, did you get a 20 on that location or what, man? And I says, I did that work in like 20 minutes. I give it back to the teacher. And she's like, there's no way you could have done all that math and all that science and all that stuff in 20 minutes. I gave the whole class a big stack of worksheets. And I'm like, well, while you were sleeping instead of giving proper education, some of us were like putting plans together, So it's like, okay. So it says, here's your work. And they go, well, there's no way you've done that. And I says, well, I did the math, If you look at like first 5 problems, and they're like, man, this kid is talking like ministerial church math that most people don't understand. It's like, yeah, man, the first 5 problems, If you look at the first 5 problems, it's the 5 books of the Bible. And I might have added instead of subtracted, or subtracted instead of added. I wasn't really focused in the first 5 problems, the first 5 books, because there's like a bunch of books, So I was like, keeper of the books kind of thing. So I said, I did all this math, and the math teacher's sitting there, and she's like, there's no way you did all that math. I says, it only took me 20 minutes here. I'm like, oh, so it says, okay. So the class, they did this work, and I did that work, and it says, well, give the kid a book on anatomy, world history, politics, and everything else. But he's supposed to be in a GATE program. What's he doing at the Center for Disease Control? I says, well, I'm trying to help your mind, So I was like, okay, we could do that. So I says, all right, what about a food court? I says, well, we tried that, when I was in the 2nd grade. They said, we'll do a around the world thing, Japanese, Chinese, American, maybe a little, Sudanese, it's legalese stuff, So it's like, all right, so maybe we'll get some American stuff, and, they got some English stuff, You go to McDonald's, you get an English muffin, right? English, And well, the food court wasn't enough. It was like, well, most people, they're eating food, and they're trying to watch TV and get an education because the teachers at school, they're like, I got this book, so here, we're just giving the worksheets and the workbook. And like, they show up, they get a paycheck, and they're not really teaching the kids, So I'm like, man, then they do an educational plan. I says, well, Congress and the Senate, they got together and they said, hey, does Florida have an educational plan to fix the education system or not? And I says, well, we got a space center. You telling me they can launch shuttles into outer space, like rocket scientists, rockets into outer space and do all that math and stuff, but they can't come up with an educational plan for the schools? You gotta be kidding me. Hey, did somebody find those charter kids or what, man? All right, cool.